Hello, welcome to 30 Minutes. I'm Rick Anthony. I'm at an age where a few of my senses need more than a little help. My senses of smell and taste are shot because of all the years I was smoking, a filthy habit. My eyes need corrective lenses to see far or near. Night driving hurts, and my hearing, for a long time I was in denial. I was up against the protestations of my wife, who was insisting that I did not hear her, or for that matter, anybody else. In fact, I wrote a humorous article about it that was published a while back. But what I found was that hearing loss isn't funny unless it's happening to somebody else. In my case, I finally gave in and went to do some research to find out what the options were, other than some of the hearing aids I had seen old people wearing. And that admission introduced me to the wild and woolly world of assistive devices for the hearing impaired. To make sense of it all, I turned to Frank Bruno, a hearing aid specialist who gave me an education about what really goes on behind the big advertisements and the direct mail pieces about devices that will perform miracles, restore your hearing, etc., etc. Pieces that fit on, in, and around the ear. Frank is the owner of Ear to Ear, located in Booth's Corner, Pennsylvania. Welcome, Frank, to 30 Minutes.
Thank you.
I was looking forward to this visit again because I continue to get all of the emails and the email letters in the mail. Of course, the advertisements, full page in every Sunday edition of every paper. Obviously, there is a growing market for this, the things you do and the things you dispense. You describe yourself as a hearing aid specialist. Until I met you, I'd never heard that term before. Your smock says HIS. What is it, and which organization confers the designation?
Well, you have to go through a lot of testing and things like that with the state. We're licensed by the Department of Health, and it's a continuing education program. Mm-hmm. Every year we have to have continuing education. So it's a lot of work, but it's well worth it in the long run.
Mm-hmm. And you've been at it 30 years?
30 years.
So you've seen everything from ear trumpets,
yes,
to the smallest device,
yes,
that is barely perceptible in an ear.
That is correct.
What's the difference between an assistive device and a hearing aid?
Well, hearing aids are a lot more, they're much more able to help people discriminate words and voices as opposed to just an amplified things. Those are the things you see in magazines, yes, for $19.
Exactly.
And they're just blanket amplifiers, and many of them are really not healthy for the patient to wear, because you can train your brain to get used to something that's very faulty, and then when you do go and get, the proper help, you may have a problem transitioning. Mm-hmm. Whereas hearing aids, they have specific filters, they do specific frequencies, and some of them have multiple channels, and some of them have intense power, and some of them have a mild to moderate, mm-hmm, power. So each hearing loss is different, very much like glasses. Each person's vision, yes, is a little different than the other person's, but with hearing aids it's even more extreme.
But as you said, the assistive devices, the amplification, mm-hmm, devices, there's always a disclaimer that says for mild or moderate hearing, right, loss.
Right. They put that on there, they subvert, the law. People don't have to go and get hearing tests the way that people really should. I think anytime a person is having a hearing loss, they absolutely need to be tested properly, need to be checked to make sure it's not a wax impaction or some other medical problem that might be causing, mm-hmm, the hearing loss. We see that all the time, especially with wax. And the wax needs to be removed, so that you can do the appropriate testing and do the appropriate fitting.
You raised an interesting point. What's the best way to get rid of earwax?
Well, the best way...
Not the little...
no, never a Q-tip.
Not a Q-tip.
The best way is to, consult a doctor, see what he says. Uh-huh. If the wax is really bad, you can have it removed. They can remove it. Or in some cases, you can get the wax drops over the counter at CVS. But just remember, with everything, you really should check with your doctor first.
To determine the extent of hearing loss, do you go to an audiologist?
You can. Audiologists are licensed to do testing as well, just like I am. And you know, you absolutely have to be tested because you've got to see where the loss is on the spectrum of the graph. And by doing that, you can properly fit the patient with a hearing aid that's going to help them.
So you can write a prescription?
It's not a prescription.
Or
it's just when we order the hearing aid, we put down all the loss information, you know, the SRT scores and things like that. Those are things that help the builders, the manufacturers, build an appropriate hearing aid to cover that specific loss.
How many types of hearing aids are there, and how many manufacturers?
Well, there are.
Or is it like televisions, washing machines, appliances are all made somewhere in China by four plants?
Sadly, there are hundreds of hearing aid manufacturers in the world. Hundreds.
Really?
Hundreds and hundreds. And they all claim that theirs are the best. And within each manufacturer, there's, you know, anywhere from 20 to 200 different models that do different things. Each model commands a different price and is a different price level. Most people just want to hear well, but some people need the bells and whistles and things like that.
What's a bell and a whistle for?
Well,
hearing aid?
there's people that have like Bluetooth apparatus, Wi-Fi, things like that.
Okay, more sophisticated technology.
Correct.
Which presumably means a higher price.
Right.
And doesn't always mean it's worth the price.
No.
The value.
No.
I know this is a pet peeve of yours, the money that's charged for hearing aids, and I guess the illiteracy in the consumer, among the consumers, who really don't know what they're buying.
Right.
Let's get into that. Let's spend some time talking about the most common myths about hearing loss and hearing aids. First one, myth one. Hearing loss is a rare occurrence.
Not anymore. Certainly not in the United States. Between 40 and 50 million Americans have hearing loss. Around the world, hundreds of millions of people have hearing loss. And that also includes children. That includes young people. It's not necessarily an old person's disease anymore.
And with children, it can be caused by
genetics.
And also the earphones that are constantly in their ears.
Well, that's a big problem. Yeah, that's a big problem that's coming. You know, they have done some studies and they found that children that use those Walkmans and headphones and things like that generally, you know, show signs of a hearing loss early on in their adulthood. Which
brings us to the second myth, that hearing loss is only caused by exposure to loud noises, whether it's kids with earphones or noises in the job, in a manufacturing plant or something?
No, the hearing loss is caused by a lot of different factors. Certainly noise is a big factor, but sometimes heredity is a factor. Sometimes just heredity, sometimes it's old age, and sometimes there's viruses that create hearing losses, especially nowadays that we're finding new and more reasons for hearing loss, because the intensive studies that they're doing on hearing loss really are starting to produce.
So, more evidence that it's environmental?
Well, environmental.
Viruses?
Yeah, environmental is definitely one of the major factors of hearing loss.
Third myth, hearing aids restore hearing to normal, just as eyeglass prescriptions can restore vision to 20/20.
Yeah, no, hearing aids will never restore to 100%. The most people usually get is anywhere between 92 and 94%. And some don't even get that much. It's not like glasses, you put them on and everything's perfect. You have one optic nerve and one optic nerve, whereas with hearing you have 30,000 and 30,000. So you keep that in the back of your mind.
30,000
nerves.
Nerves in your ear?
In your ears, on each side.
Those are the little cilia? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's a lot, and they're affected, and so you can't restore or replace nerves. It's just probably never going to happen.
Here's one of my favorite myths: hearing aids are ugly. because
No.
that's one of the things that kept me away for a long time. Having this thing stuck on the side of my head.
No, we have models that are tiny. We have models that are mid-size. It really does depend on what we need to get for the patient to you know, put in their ear for them to hear well. Naturally, if a person has a really, really bad loss, they're going to command a little more power than somebody that has a mild to moderate. But in recent years, the last couple years, the sizes have gotten smaller and the power's gotten greater.
You anticipated my next myth.
Okay.
Hearing aids are big and bulky.
No. Let me show you an example of a tiny hearing aid. This is a tiny hearing aid. It's probably less than an inch long. It goes down into the canal. It has this tiny little extraction handle to take it out, and it uses a very, very tiny battery.
Right.
And most people that have a moderate loss can wear something like this now, whereas 10 years ago they couldn't. They would have to wear something about this size. And then for
That's
people,
big and bulky.
Yeah, well, it really isn't, because big and bulky would come to the high-powered one, but
that is big and bulky.
it's big and bulky, but we color it and we design it so that it's as unnoticeable as possible. This particular unit has enough power to help relieve people that used to wear the ones that go behind the ear that are really big and bulky. So we're getting better with the sizes. We're getting better with the ability to put the power in that's necessary to keep everybody happy. Some of the newer models, which everyone is selling, you know, for a lot of money, which looks like this. This goes behind the ear. It has a little tube and a little bud, and this can command quite a bit of power. And it's, for the most part, completely unnoticeable unless you're really looking for it. It uses a battery that goes in here, and it is preset to the patient's loss. It also has memories. We have the ability to give you memories, like you have a memory for home, around the house, a memory for when you go to the restaurant, so that you don't get the offensive background noises of the old hearing aids. The old hearing aids give a lot of background noise. The newer ones have a way of filtering them out.
Can you control the volume on that one?
No, you don't need to, because it's preset to what the patient needs. So there's no button. I mean, there's no volume control wheel. Now, don't get me wrong. For those people that want a volume control wheel, there are models that have a volume control wheel. My experience is the least amount of work the patient has to do, the better off for the patient.
And does that come in different colors?
Yes,
that's flesh color.
Yeah, we have different colors. We have beige, we have browns. We even have metallic blue for some of the kids that really want to have a fancy hearing aid.
Next myth. Only old people get hearing loss.
No.
I kind of covered this earlier.
Yeah, when I started in around 1985, 1986, the average age of a person getting a hearing aid was 75 years old. Today, it's nearer to 50.
Really?
So things have changed, and there's a lot of reasons for that. One is the information out there, you know, is so much better for people. The testing is so much better. People are definitely more into their own health, so that's an important thing. We did some statistics back in the 80s on when the population would really come into fruition for hearing aids, and it was 2016. Where, you know, a predominant amount of the baby boomers would be 65 or older, and most hearing losses, you know, generally start in the 50s and 60s. People know if they have a hearing loss. They may tend to ignore it, but if they're asking their friends and neighbors or their kids to repeat themselves over and over again, usually there's a clue there that something's wrong. Hearing loss does not hurt. And if it was like a cavity in a tooth that hurt, everyone would be rushing to get their hearing tested. But this is one of those maladies that generally, for the most part, doesn't have any pain associated with it.
Next myth. Wearing two hearing aids is not necessary.
Really depends on the patient. And naturally, if you have one bad ear and one normal ear, yeah, only one. But in most cases, if you have a hearing loss, 2 hearing aids is generally the accepted rule.
So it's not just the ploy on the part of the people who are selling hearing aids to make a sale of 2 rather than 1?
I would have trouble selling you one brand new tire if you have another bad tire. It just doesn't make all that much sense. If you're going to fix the problem, fix the problem. It's like one lens in your glasses. You know, how much effectiveness will you have if the other eye has problems?
But if I have hearing loss and it's worse in one ear than the other, one is mild, the other is for whatever reason, could I not get away with having only one hearing aid for the?
No, you would want to assist both of them, and each ear would require different parameters in the hearing aid to cover each individual hearing loss of the ear. I actually do that anyway. Most other dispensers do the same thing. You know, if you have one bad ear and one not so bad ear, we tailor them to work as a pair.
Okay. Next myth. The invisible hearing aids worn in the ear or inserted are the best hearing aids to purchase.
Not necessarily. It really depends on the individual. You do have to look at the cosmetics of things, you know, and you want to make them as cosmetically appealing as possible. But some people require the ones that go behind the ear. Some people require ones that do different things. So it's not like a blanket statement like anybody can wear that little one that I showed you, that little example. Not everybody can even wear that. So you have to look at the patient individually.
It's not driven mostly by vanity? That is, I don't want a thing over my ear. I want something that goes way in, nobody can see it.
The truth is that we're able really to cover almost all the cosmetics that need to be worried about. I understand that a lot of people, especially some women and some men, they really want to be as discreet as possible with their hearing loss. But on the other side of the coin, if you have a hearing loss, generally everybody knows it anyway. So they're kind of pleased if they happen to see a little edge of a hearing aid. But for the most part, cosmetically, they're getting better and better and better at it.
Next myth. Hearing aids squeak a lot.
The feedback. They have, that's been a problem, and that's always going to be a problem. Feedback occurs when the sound gets too close to the microphone, and it causes the feedback. They have now a lot of feedback cancellation devices. That this unit that I showed you that goes behind the ear has feedback cancellation within it, which helps control that. You're never going to control it all the way. If the hearing aid goes up too loud, you're going to get feedback. If you develop a wax impaction, you're going to get feedback. If anything blocks the hearing aid, you're going to get feedback. I don't think they're ever going to be able to correct it totally, but we do have it down to a dull roar with the different parameters that we can put in it.
Does wearing glasses have any effect on the squeaking?
No.
Particularly if you have metal?
No.
No?
No, the glasses really don't have any effect unless, for some strange reason, the bar of the glasses crosses over the microphone of the hearing aid. That's for the ones behind the ear. The ones in the ear, generally the only time you're going to get feedback is if it's up too loud, you have wax, or something's blocking it.
Quick question, if the hearing aid that goes in is inserted in the ear, deep within the ear canal, is that permanent? Can you just leave it there?
No, you have to take it out and clean it. We recommend you take it out every night before you go to bed. However, there's no rule that says you shouldn't sleep in them. If you roll over, though, on your side, you're going to get the feedback. It's going to wake you up.
Sure.
But the hearing aids are designed to be removed, be wiped off with a tissue, brushed off to keep wax residue from, getting into the receiver tubes.
The next myth, hearing aids won't help when there's a lot of background noise in a restaurant or a game.
Yeah, that's actually more of a myth. If the hearing aid is set properly and the parameters are done properly, they still, the patient really should still hear the people directly around them. There are some situations where no hearing aid's going to work well, fireworks, and you're right, a stadium where people are screaming and hollering.
Yes.
But if it's set properly, you should be able to hear the people directly around you, the people you're with.
Next myth, the more you pay, the better quality you're buying.
That's the biggest myth of all. Most people just want to hear well. Most people in this business, sadly, are commissioning salespeople. So part of what is being paid, and it could be anywhere from 25 to 60%, goes right into someone's pocket. That's really not in the best interest of the patient. Most all hearing aid companies, manufacturers, have the very same stuff. And you can price it around, you know, and you really should shop. Everybody should shop, you know, to get the best quality pricing as well as quality hearing aid that they can get for the money they're going to spend. Because you have to remember that hearing aids last 3 to 5 years, and it's closer to 3 in humid places, and it's closer to 5 in dry places. It's just the way it is.
Again, you anticipated the final myth.
No,
Hearing aids are a one-time purchase.
No.
I wondered about that.
Yeah, no, you have to plan. If you're wearing hearing aids or you start wearing hearing aids, you have to plan that every 3 to 5 years you're going to go. Well, they wear out and the hearing changes. And even the insurance companies that help cover hearing aids, and believe me, they only help, they know that because the benefits are paid every 3 years. Some insurance companies pay them every 2.
But the prospect of having to spend, I'm going to pick a number, $2,500 a piece.
Right.
Every 3 years.
Yeah, but not at my place.
Not at your place. Okay.
not at my place.
But most people who don't know about you, $5,000 every 3 years, particularly if you don't have insurance coverage.
And some people pay it, and some people pay more. I had a patient not long ago that checked with a doctor, a pretty important doctor, and he wanted $12,300 for a set of hearing aids. And I was pretty astounded.
Well, okay, leads up to this question. How is a consumer supposed to know whether the hearing aid they're purchasing has the latest technology, and how often does the technology really change?
They change the technology yearly, but only in small increments because they haven't really found, you know, the keys to everything that needs to be done. They've come a long way since I started, a huge long way. But every year something new comes out, just like anything else. But the hearing aids that a person purchases today should be good for 3 to 5 years, no matter what they come out with new. You know, there's no, you know, you can't, I mean, you could, but you wouldn't want to go every year and buy a hearing aid. That's just not cost effective, and you don't really need it. Most people just want to hear well. If I do my job right, they're going to hear well. Is it going to be perfect? Absolutely not.
Why can't a hearing aid simply be updated? Use the same case. They'll look essentially the same.
Because the motor inside the hearing aid, which is the chip, changes.
And it's cheaper to replace the entire unit than to simply replace the chip?
Yeah, it really isn't a difference in price. The shell doesn't mean much. The shell is probably the cheapest part of a hearing aid, the shell, but the components, that's where things change. And you have different size mics, you have different size receivers, different size chips, depending again on the patient's hearing. If they have an additional loss, you're going to have to change chips anyway.
There are, in most technologies, regardless of what type of technologies, every once in a while there's a leap to a higher level. Either it's smaller, more functionality, reduced cost, whatever. Have we seen leaps in hearing aids, or will we see leaps in hearing aids?
We've seen leaps in the pricing, I can tell you that. But as for leaps in technology, I think the last big leap was probably around 2000 to 2005, where the programmables started to come out. They tried the programmables back in the 90s, and for the most part, they were a colossal failure. They really didn't have the technology.
What does that mean? The user could program it?
No, where you have the computer and you program in the different parameters. Back in the 90s when they tried it, it was a failure. They didn't have the programs right. It just didn't work, and they kind of abandoned it for a while. But then it came back, and now it's back with with incredible software that can be programmed into the hearing aid. just remember, you know, there's with other dispensaries and bigger companies and things like that, they charge big money for that stuff.
Right.
You know, and you know, usually after the warranty runs out on the hearing aid, they're going to start charging to reprogram and things like that. But even with reprogramming, the hearing aid is going to wear out, and it's going to have a place where it can't be made any better, and the patient's going to be forced to get something else.
You don't see the day when there'll be an implant?
No.
Just below the surface of the ear, not in the ear, but no?
No, because any time you have something like that, you know, implants, you have infection problems and things like that. You know, people need something they can take off and put on, you know, at will, as opposed to something that's like permanently placed there. They're not going to have that. Now they have the cochlear implants, which is a totally different
My daughter had that. She was completely deaf in one ear, and it was weird. I think she sneezed or coughed or something like that, and all of a sudden she had lost hearing in one ear.
It can happen.
And years later, we went down to I guess Penn, and they put the device in her skull.
Amazing.
And now, come to think of it, she has to go back because for an adjustment. It has to be cleaned or something like that.
Yeah, there's always something. There's never going to be a cure-all for all. But the cochlear implants are a godsend for especially children. Children are the ones that benefit most from those types of devices. But you have to remember that to get the cochlear implant, you know, it's a lot of work, and there's some risk, and you have to think about that too.
Suppose I come to you, or someone comes to you, makes a purchase of one of these devices, and after 3 months, it just isn't working. It doesn't feel right. It keeps falling out. I can't. It wasn't made right, or for whatever reason. What happens? Am I stuck with that?
No, we have. There's all kinds of things that can be done. You're going to know within the first 30 to 45 days if the product is something that's going to be suitable for you. We have a full money back refund. You know, in our contracts. It says 30 days. I extend it for 45. Some people need that extra time. And they can return them and get a full refund, or we can explore another option. You have to remember, though, that you cannot expect this is going to perfect your hearing.
Right.
You have to expect that it takes work. You got to wear them. And if you don't follow the protocol of wearing them to get used to them, you're really not going to do very well.
Getting used to them also means the brain has to get used to them, right?
Right. It's a new way of receiving sound signals, so the brain does take time adjusting. Some people, you know, the people that wait longer than they should to get hearing help, they're the ones that have the hardest time, you know, acclimating to it. So you have to, you know, do wearing schedules. You know, I've watched, usually the younger the patient is when they get the hearing aid, the better off they do in the long run.
Does getting a hearing aid suspend the further impairment of hearing?
Unfortunately, no. There's been some studies on that. Sometimes you activate nerves that you know, were kind of asleep, and they stay alive longer. But you know, hearing loss is generally progressive, and the older you get, the worse it gets.
Well, I've learned a lot. I hope our viewers have learned a lot as well about hearing loss and hearing aids, and we have exploded most of the myths about hearing aids. For that, I thank you.
And I thank you for being here. It was very exciting.
Thank you. Thanks, Frank. Until next time, this is 30 Minutes. I am Rick Anthony. Take very good care of yourselves.